Welcome to Upper Pylon 2. Our mission is to provide you with an in-depth review of every episode of DS9 in the order they were broadcast. Tonight's episode is The Ship, and this is Matt in Buffalo.
This is Chris in South Carolina.
And this is Matt from Arizona, and you are cleared for docking. That's right, everybody. I have survived my first year of law school in one piece. And I will be back with you constantly over the summer. So I'm looking forward to finally getting into season 5 with these guys. I've missed them a lot over these last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Matt, and it's great to have you back.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And now it's time to have some fun. So let's get right into this week's episode, which is The Ship. Short synopsis. Cisco and the crew fight to keep the intelligence find of the decade, a downed Jem'Hadar fighter. This is the second episode of season 5 and 98th overall. It first aired October 7th, 1996. Teleplay by Hans Beimler. Story by Pam Wigginton and Rick Carson. And it was directed by Kim Friedman. The guest stars this week include Caitlin Hopkins as Kelowna, F.J. Rio as Enrique Munoz, Hillary Shepard as Hoya, and uncredited CGI as the Dying Changeling. You forgot to put Ashes in there.
That's true. Yeah, and it's very weird that that's actually called out on the Memory Alpha. Somebody's having a joke in there somewhere, so I kept it in there as well.
Oh, was that actually on Memory Alpha? I thought that was just you being a smartass.
No, well, yes, but yes, it legit is a credit on Memory Alpha.
You didn't put it there, did you?
No, and it has a link to CGI and everything.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, now someone needs to make an entry for Ashes as the dead changeling.
Yeah, because there is a switch. They go from CGI ashes to practical ashes at one point.
Right.
It's a subtle shift. You might not have noticed it.
No, but you know what? We're talking about the end of the episode before we start about the beginning. So, Matt, whenever you're ready, take us into The Ship.
Teaser. As our episode opens, it's clear the Federation no longer considers the Dominion all that much of a threat. Inexplicably. Not only are they once again in the Gamma Quadrant in just a runabout, they are looking now to set up a mining operation on a planet over there. What? All done stripping the Alpha Quadrant of natural resources? Anyhow, we get a nice character moment between Miles and a crewman, Munoz, and they have this fun ball-busting type relationship. Soon after, the runabout crew back up on the ship, in orbit, a bunch of red shirts, detect a ship crashing onto the planet. Our hero crew, consisting of Cisco, Dax, Worf, Miles, Munoz, and another guy, investigate and find out it is an intact, albeit upside down, Jem'Hadar fighter that is now embedded into the wall of a mountain. Cut to the opening credits. Now, I'm goofing around here a little bit, kind of them downplaying the threat of the Dominion. I mean, you just kind of got to do that.
They totally are, though. But don't they? I forget. Don't they pay some lip service to the fact that they're supposed to be supposedly really far away from where the Dominion is?
Right. Yes, they do. And I get that to get this story, which is ultimately okay, you got to do this. But that being said, they made the absolute right decision to at least have a couple episodes off the bat in this season dealing with the Dominion. Because you had that cliffhanger that sent chills down your spine. And to have them immediately come back with the continuation cliffhanger and then like a Klingon or a Ferengi comedy story wouldn't be right. They needed at least to keep this going for another episode, at least, and that's what they did.
Right, and I think I'm going to make an argument later that it's good that this episode follows the premiere because I think it plays into some of the Dominion motivations in this episode, and I'll explain what I mean when we get there. But yeah, it's a great opening. I like it when they shoot on location. It always looks nice when they're not on a soundstage.
Yeah, that's the most successful part of this episode, in my opinion. And we'll get into it a little bit later, but you can tell it's really hot. The actors' hair is jumbled. They seem legitimately sweaty and not just stage makeup sweat.
And knowing her, Terry Farrell was dying because she has some kind of condition that doesn't let her be in the sun too often.
Yeah, and that it comes across. It's really good. And the visual at the beginning, and we see it repeated later on with the runabout, but the visual of a ship entering into the atmosphere, burning up, it's damn nice visual too.
Yeah, and I like I forget because like we haven't done Dominion heavy storylines for a very long time. You know, when we get into the episode later, is this the first time we see the interior of a Jemadar ship?
Probably, yes. I would imagine so.
Right. I like the new stuff like that.
Yes, the good visual, it's such a little thing, but I don't like the look of the ship in the mountain. It just, and they can't make it look amazing like the CGI or the model work that they have, but it just doesn't seem right on scale, or the lines don't quite work.
You know what, I have the same problem, and it doesn't bother me that much, but I hear what you're saying. I think it's the contours of the ship, because supposedly the ship is upside down, right? But it just, from what's sticking out of the rock face, it doesn't obviously look like the Jemadar warship, which has a very, very distinctive scarab-like structure, and it's impossible to create that, I think, on a level visual field. So the contours seem off.
And my interpretation of it was, not only did it flip upside down, it seems like it might have gone in backwards.
It's definitely upside down, because when we get to the scenes on the ship later, the control panels are on the ceiling. So
sure, that's right. But my interpretation of the part that we are seeing is the pointy bit at the front of the Jemadar fighter that we typically see shoot, and that seems like that's the part that's
maybe it's just hard for us, because when we see these things, they're always in action. They're flying by real fast. We never honestly get a good look at them. So I don't know what one looks like upside down. I couldn't tell you.
And this is, as far as I'm concerned, nitpicking. It's not a real big deal, but it's what we do. But that said, it still is a pretty cool undertaking that they did. They went on location and built half an embedded spaceship into a side of a mountain, and it ultimately works just fine.
Oh yeah, and it's a nice little effect of opening.
Right. Well, speaking of opening it, upon our return in Act 1, they managed to get inside the ship through what they assume is a troop deployment ramp. And we get a nice kind of a horror movie section here. Flashing lights, which, by the way, really freaked out my sleeping baby in my arms when we were watching. The light was really disturbing him. And we get some, also inexplicably, hanging bodies from the ceiling. They didn't strap their feet in on this flight, so that's a little bit goofy, but oh well. Everybody on the ship is dead. It seems like the inertial dampeners had broken, and instead of them just being, bloody smears on the back wall, they are just still intact, battered bodies hanging from the ceiling. And Sisko recognizes this for what it is: an incredibly important, massive find for Starfleet intelligence. They have to get the ship back to the station. End of story. And for that, they'll probably need the Defiant. So back on the station, we get a little bit of a comedy scene in this. There's not going to be much in this episode between Bashir and Quark, who seem to have gotten in a bit of smuggling problems for bringing in medical supplies. Anyhow, a very pregnant Kira is offered a Defiant to get some help. It's also very weird that she chose this moment to just blather super important, potentially super top secret information to Quark in front of everyone. That's just bad. Anyhow, now back to the planet. The runabout is destroyed in orbit by a new Jemadar ship that is entering. The crew watch as the runabout burns up in the atmosphere. Commercial break. So we get some nice rising tension here.
Yeah, and I like, we can argue about how effective the episode is as a whole, but I always like a good siege episode, and that's what this is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's purely what it is. And like you said, we'll discuss how effective maybe it is at that. But at least through these first couple acts, I'm, goofing on it a little bit, but it's a nice setup. It's our ship stranded all by themselves, obviously now in a very bad spot, and easily could be picked off by an overpowering enemy, and it's setting the stage nice for like a practical no-win situation of like, how is our heroes going to get out of this?
In the middle of the desert, protecting a very battered structure. It literally is kind of the Alamo.
Yeah, it's a strong parallel. So, Act 2?
Yeah.
Act 2. Immediately after returning from the break, the dirty space hippie alien is shot and killed by a group of Jem'Hadar now bum rushing the ship on foot.
Useless science officer number 3.
Right. Did you pick up on that guy is actually one of the same species of the terrible space hippie aliens from the TOS?
No, but if that's true, then it's good that he's dead.
Yeah, it's by intent too. One of the terrible hippies had that huge ear piece, and that was what this guy was. And believe it or not, they have shown up multiple times through Star Trek lore and history. I had no idea that this was actually a real species that was established and explored to a little degree here or there. Oh, but yeah, good that he's killed. Anyhow, a little firefight goes down, and they retreat back to the ship. And in the fight, Muniz takes a gut shot from a Jem'Hadar rifle. Now in the ship, they wonder why the Jem'Hadar aren't just beaming in to continue the fight. It's oddly quiet. And O'Brien keeps surrendering his sleeves to try at least slow, if not totally stop, Muniz's bleeding. It's not working. He continues to bleed. Soon, they get a call from a Vorta leading the Jem'Hadar siege. She offers parley outside. That brings us to our first clip, which, by the way, for the first time in UP2 history, this clip spans an act break into the third act. So you'll hear at one point a nice Jem'Hadar beaming into the ship. Clip.
Your photograph doesn't do you justice. You're quite striking in person.
Look, I'm a little busy, so let's skip the platter.
Wayne's report on you was right. You are direct. I like that. So let me cut to the chase. I believe that is the correct expression. This is our ship. We want it back.
Was your ship. Now it's mine.
Captain, I'm a little disappointed. Oh, that's the attitude of a thief, not a Starfleet captain with a reputation for integrity. This is clearly our property. What gives you any claim to it?
An old legal tradition. Salvage rights. We found a wrecked ship and a dead crew, and we found it first.
A very interesting position. But I'm afraid the Dominion doesn't recognize that tradition. What may be even more to the point, we have you completely surrounded and outnumbered. Would you like something to eat, Captain? Or maybe something to drink? These are quilamas, a personal favorite. They're not poisonous, if that's what you're thinking.
Not to you, anyway.
I hope you're not teaching Jake to be this suspicious, Benjamin. Or do you prefer Ben?
Captain will be fine.
I'm sure it's my fault that we seem unable to establish an understanding between us, Captain. I'm sorry I'm not more experienced in these matters. This is my first mission outside the Dominion and my very first dealing with anyone from the Federation. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I hope you'll at least try to consider my offer with an open mind.
I'm listening.
If you'll leave our ship and your crew back to your space station, unharmed. Our accommodations may not be lavish, but I promise you'll all be well cared for, especially your wounded.
If you think I'm going to deliver my people into your hands without a fight, then this really must be your first mission.
All right, let's unpack a little bit of that. We're into Act 3 now, but let's focus on that clip and back in Act 2. So, gentlemen, do you have opinions on our Vorta of the Week here?
I think that her look is very striking. I don't know if the ears go higher than the other guys, but she looks very elfish. I just feel like it was slightly different, but I liked it. And I think that this is something that the Vorta would do once they realized here's a human male. They have certain, I don't know. I felt like she was kind of playing up a little bit of her beauty and seeming like a damsel in distress to some extent. And I just wondered if they were kind of subtly hinting at her pulling him in a different way than the last guy they sent after.
Her beauty and her naivete, supposedly, because if you remember, like, Wei-Yun really didn't fool Sisko that much. The only time he was ever successfully fooled by a Vorta, and granted it's when he didn't know that it was a Vorta, was when it was a woman back in season 2 when they first met the Dominion who seemed helpless. So why not use that? Yeah. Why not use that tactic again?
And to Chris's point, I think she is going to use what she has at her disposal, and she does have a very low-cut shirt. I mean, this is fair to enter into the discussion because she is trying to manipulate people.
She's got the low-cut shirt. She's wearing earrings. You know, things that you wouldn't think that someone who commands an army of killer soldiers would normally dress like.
Right. And I mean, this is where it is potentially interesting because she might not necessarily be she might not be lying as much as you might think. Because I think the situation here shows that they had to scramble somebody to face this situation, that they might not have had the best Vorta for this incident at hand, so they had to rush whoever they had. So her being a little naive is plausible. It's still not all that plausible that she hasn't had any dealings outside the or outside the Dominion, given that we're outside it.
No, but I thought I can't remember what the line was, but I take it as more plausible that she may not have had any dealings with people from the Federation yet.
Well, that we can probably take as true, because like, how much is she likely to get? But she said, this is my first mission outside the Dominion. We can kind of guess she's stationed at the edge of it, at least, because she's here now weeks outside of it. But it is plausible that she is maybe in over her head a little bit here. I mean, she ultimately fails.
She does, but I don't know. There's something I like about her. I wish we had seen more of this version of this Vorta, since they're all clones.
And the interesting, well, yeah, that's true too. This was originally supposed to be the original female Vorta that we saw with, like, the chest Hadouken. She that actress was unavailable, and this was apparently the second time she tried to get her back, and she was just always unavailable. I guess the Star Trek producers didn't get the hint of, sorry, I can't make it.
Well, I've seen her in a bunch of stuff too. So she's a character actress that's turned up in like a ton of other TV. So it is plausible that she just happened to have another job as this was happening. But I like this actress though. This actress actually goes on to play. Remember the Voyager episode with the fake, with the con artist who impersonate Starfleet officers?
Yeah, with the fake Janeway. She was fake Janeway.
She's the fake Janeway.
I knew I recognized her from somewhere. That's great. Great.
I like her a bit more in this one.
Well, she's showing off more of her assets in this one, if you get my drift.
Well, yes, but no, for other reasons too.
I do like I like this character though. I honestly wish once they decided that the Vorta were clones that she had made some sort of return appearance.
Yeah. Was that fruit that she offered poisonous? She doesn't deny it.
She plays it pretty coy, and the smile that she gives him is like, touche.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's like a little heavy-handed, naive. Like, oh, here I'm in over my head. Let me try the poison food at the parlay kind of a thing.
I don't know, but if you want to retcon it, later we find out from Wei-Yun that the Vorta really don't eat food because they have no taste buds, really. So how could this be a favorite of hers?
There you go. I think that adds more to it. I think it works because, like, if her idea is to like pick off some people on there that she knows won't be the changelings, poison would probably be an effective way Well, obviously, if somebody's out there, if it was the changeling, he would just turn into a bird and fly away or whatever. So
Well,
yeah,
also, too,
I think
mean,
it's poisoning's a good way to start picking off the solids.
Yeah, but at the same time, there you have Worf right there, who's standing guard on top of the ship, and if he sees Cisco drop dead.
Oh well, that's the cinematic poisoning of him grabbing his throat and keeling over. All he has to do is take a bite of it, go back in. Half an hour later, craps his pants and it's just bloody diarrhea and he's poisoned. And you're like, oh, what the hell happened? I think that might have been the way to go with a poisoning. Just saying. Now, do we want to get into the bromance between Miles Edward O'Brien and crewman Muniz here? Because this is where we've now had a couple scenes of them. Father-son almost kind of a relationship.
So this is where you wish that they thought just a little bit ahead. They know that they got this war about to happen. Why were we not having a couple scenes? Just a scene here, a scene there, where we know that we have to have Miles do some exposition. Last season, we had quite a few Miles O'Brien episodes. Why not throw Muniz in there and say, hey, look, dude, we got to roll for you. You're going to be a bit part in a couple of these episodes. Then you're going to have a big starring role where you die.
Here's the thing.
I just wish they would have done it and set it up, because this is so good here, but it would be so much better if it had some.
But here's the thing, though. Like, I wish they would had played up the bromance more. But I will point out that at least they did choose someone who had been in a couple of episodes already. This is not his first appearance. He was in a couple of episodes in season 4. Granted, he wasn't like shoved at the forefront, but he's there as an established member of O'Brien's engineering staff. So at least it's not doing the, I always cite that Voyager episode where that one woman who he had no connection to gets revived, and all of a sudden we're supposed to care.
Oh, that's awful.
Right. And I get that it's slightly better than it would have been if he hadn't have been there at all.
I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying
that just a scene or two, maybe they're at the table together in the first one, just something you can go back and on rewatch say, oh, they were buddies.
Yeah, no, I get you. But what I'm saying is at least they had the forethought to not use someone we've never seen before.
Right. Fair.
Well, I mean, you can kind of see in this own episode the reasons why at this funny bit in time in TV history where it's transitional to modern TV, they probably have a hard time doing long-term plans like that. Like here, they wanted to just bring an actress back who they had established, and they can't do it. Now to promise somebody like, hang on, in a year and a half, we'll have a part in a calendar where you'll come back. Trust us. That guy is probably looking at it as like, oh yeah, right. So
they've done stuff like this. They've had characters that have shown up.
Yeah, but I think it's what, to Matt's point, it's fortuitous that their schedules allow for it though, because I mean, if these are working actors, or if they're trying to be working actors, and a lot of parts don't come their way, you're having to turn down work on the vague promise that you might come back.
I get that point. My only point here is that if they knew that they were gonna, they didn't know. This came out of nowhere.
No, probably not.
My left field. I guess I'm still rubbing up against a little bit of that '90s episodic television kind of mindset, and these guys are like kind of in the episodic and kind of not. They're trying to push the boundaries a bit. And
right, they're trying to break the mold, but unfortunately, like we've been saying,
the mold is there. Yeah,
I mean, the mold is there, and they're the first ones trying to do it, so of course they're going to make freshman mistakes, if you will.
Right. So we can agree that I think we can all agree that what we do see between their relationship is pretty good without having gotten that extra.
Oh, and I like him. I like that he's, this character done wrong is Harry Kim, young, inexperienced, trying to show off. But Muniz, I actually kind of like him. He's a lot more endearing than Harry Kim.
That's a really interesting parallel. And yeah, we get a lot more endearing qualities from this guy in a fraction of an episode than we do in 7 seasons of Harry Kim.
That might be overstating the case a little bit.
No.
But in the immediacy of this one episode, they definitely do better than than the large majority of Harry Kim's stuff in
Hey, at
Voyager.
least he gets stuff done. I mean, like even him wounded, he manages to save O'Brien and Dax later. So,
No denying any of that. No denying any of that. And I'm not saying they didn't do this very well. All I'm saying is it might be a slight overstatement that they didn't, in 7 seasons, endear you a little bit to Harry Kim.
Honestly, Chris, I mean, joking aside, he was one character I legitimately never liked, and that was persistent through the course of the series.
Man, I hate that for you.
I'm sorry, but there are other ones that I've have complex relationships with, like Torres. Like I can appreciate her as a interesting, flawed person. Like
right,
her characteristics make her an interesting, flawed person. Harry, I just did not like him. Never could get on board with anything he represented practically.
And the only time I ever really liked him was in that episode with the alternate future where he crashes the ship.
Love that one. I like Nightingale too. I think.
Nightingale's terrible.
No, I like it. Where he's the captain there for a little while.
Where he proves that he sucks at being the captain.
Oh, come on, man.
TDQ. Guys, back to Chris's point. Yes, I got to agree that we would have liked to have seen more of their relationship before. The part that I'm going to wish they had a little bit more thought around was this is pretty much, I think, our first time we get to see O'Brien being closely connected to death and people that he cares about, since he spent 20 years in prison and ended up having to kill one of his friends and has apparently been in therapy ever since, and he almost killed himself over the death of his friend.
And not for nothing, I believe that the last time Munez was on the show was in that episode.
Oh, even better of a connection. That man, oh man, wouldn't it have been on point to have him have some sort of a callback to that?
And it doesn't have to be too deep, just like a really anguish, not again, like, or something to that effect, or
something like that, or his friends and his support system of Dax, Cisco, somebody like, hey, we need to watch Miles now. You know, just something of like, I get that they have a mission to take care of, but they're also friends and they're looking out for each other. That I would have just loved, considering that was our big criticism of that episode and Down the Hill.
Plus, you could also
this would have been that time for that to pay off a little bit.
Plus, and you could also tie it into you could tie that trauma into the fact that, you know, here's O'Brien, this former soldier who's in another situation where he's gonna try to not have his comrade on the battlefield die, and then you combine that with the trauma from hard time, and that could be really good.
And you dump all the bull, make me want to cuss, Worf stuff here in the middle, where Worf's just a complete jackass, because none of that's necessary. We all know where he's coming from. You don't have to establish Klingon values for us again. In fact, we're just coming off of a whole episode of that crap. So a lot of that just comes off bad and unnecessary.
Let's get to that, because I do want to discuss it. I see what they were trying to do, and I agree that with the impulse to try to do it, but I just wish they had executed it differently.
Well, guys, that's going to be part of one of the clips in the next act. So let me go through that, and then why don't we start getting into that, because that is going to be one of my big talking points of this episode as well. So in Act 3, like I said, during that last clip, a Jem'Hadar beamed onto the ship. And Dax and O'Brien basically stumble on him planting some sort of a sensor on there. And the Jem'Hadar attacks, using notably only a knife. Worf and Cisco rush back in, but it is the leaking Munez who saves Miles' life. They aren't sure what the sensor was doing. It didn't seem like the Jem'Hadar need to know what the situation of the Starfleet people are. They probably know that already. They figure it must be something else on the ship, so they start to try and figure out what it could be. Miles and Munez talk some more, and Munez seems to know what's up. He suspects he's dying, and basically, he's right. That wound simply is not closing. There must be something in the Jem'Hadar weapon that prevents it from coagulating. Diabolical. Nice.
You know what I like, again, like it fits right in with, this is the same species that would use a biological weapon to wipe out an entire civilization that was trying to resist them. Like, it's just, this fits right into their character being so sadistic that of course they would put this thing in their weapons that would prevent wounds from healing.
Yeah, because we see exactly what the purpose of that is that, okay, well, maybe if your enemy gets away, they're dragging a dying comrade back with them, and they're in their hidey hole, and they have to devote resources to protecting him, keeping him alive. It's also a moral or a morale drag. You're just watching somebody slowly die. It's awful, and it makes a lot of sense for these people, and it's totally consistent. Yeah, it's
smart. As weird as it sounds, I like it when they make the Dominion this ugly, because it makes them feel scary.
Oh, and they absolutely should, since they know where they're going at this point. You need to set them up as a very different enemy that is going to use very dirty tricks at their disposal. I mean, that's what you want.
Right.
Right? Yeah. So Sisko knows Miles is now distracted and forces him to focus on the ship and not his dying friend. And because of all that, tensions are starting to rise in our next clip.
Chief, structurally, a lot about this ship's design matches the other Jem'Hadar warships we've seen.
But there are significant differences. There are many systems that we are completely unfamiliar with.
Well, I can start to restore parts of the systems one at a time. That'll give us a chance to test them and establish their functions. It's going to take a while.
How long?
I wish I knew.
Well, you can do it, Chief. I don't think a ship's been invented that you can't figure out. Munoz is strong. He'll make it.
No, he will not. He will not see tomorrow.
Keep that to yourself. I don't want him to hear that kind of talk.
It does no good to shield him from the truth. Let him prepare for death.
The hell I will. His only hope is to keep fighting. If he gives up, it's over.
It was over the moment he was shot by the Jem'Hadar.
Now you listen to me. That boy's life is in our hands, and I won't let anybody give up on him.
Worf, what do you say we go look at that ion exchange matrix we found? And on the way, maybe we can discuss some of the finer parts of diplomacy.
All right, so I'll start getting into that, I suppose. That is, I mean, we have another clip where there's two standout scenes in this episode that I think are borderline legit bad. And this is the first of the two, and it's a bit cringy with Worf. It's just like...
It's like, well, he's been around humans for so long, why now? What I like, if the other scene you're referring to is when they start yelling at each other later in the middle of whatever's going on, the thing that I find more appropriate about that scenario versus this one is that, yeah, they're in a bad situation now, but in the other one, they're having stuff thrown at them, like the charges are going off around them. So like naturally, I would think that I like what I mean here is I like the idea of these people getting testy with each other in a bad situation. I just wish that it would have been done a little bit better.
Yeah, so I know Chris will want to talk to this too, but since you kind of led right into it, their goal in this episode, I think, is very obvious. And at one point, they tell us it's very hot in here, we're all dirty, and whatever, bombings. And when they say that, I go, it is, and you are? It doesn't. Once they go from the outside on location where, yeah, no kidding, it looks hot, you can feel it. Once they go to the soundstage in this ship, it doesn't seem hot. It doesn't seem dirty. And what they are trying to convey to us of this rising tension because of the environment, it is not conveyed on the screen. So that when these guys blow up at each other, since you don't know why they are, because that is not effectively communicated to the audience, It's weird and bad, and you're like, what the hell is this guy's problem?
I don't know if I would say it was not communicated well. I just, I think it depends on how much you go with the visual cues, because they are pretty beat up. They've, a couple of them have, Munoz is shot. O'Brien and Dax have been knocked around. They've all been in firefights at some point during this episode. So I get the sense that they're dirty. I kind of went with the fact that it's probably hot because, just for the virtue of the fact that the ship is not functioning, right? So I would take it that would mean that the insulation is coming from the outside, which means that it's the hot air is coming into the ship. I know that's a lot of assumptions, and you're right. They probably should have visualized that more, but I that didn't bother me as much.
It did bother me because it's everything you're saying is, yeah, you're right. The situation would set that, but they're bumped up, but they're not bloody. I mean, I can understand the actors don't want to have caked on dirt makeup and blood on them and have their whatever tattered, but I think having little things like that and have them sprayed sweat on their faces all the time. I get they wouldn't want that, but that would help. And I'm like, that's the visual cue you want. You don't, it's that show don't tell. At one point they actually have to tell us we're hot. Show me you're hot. And that would be like, okay, now I understand why these people are.
Well, sometimes saying it on top of the already obvious can work. I mean, when I hear, we're hot, we're tired. You remember that one line in Matt in Aliens where Hicks pulls Vasquez and Hudson aside and he says, look, we're all in strung out shape, but stay frosty and alert. We can't let one of those things in here.
Yes, of course.
So, that's my go-to. Like, he's saying what the situation is, but we're also seeing it as well. So maybe
they don't do half of that in this episode.
Yeah, I know they don't do half of that.
So you sound like me trying to defend the Muse right now.
No.
Let's not get carried away here, Chris.
No, it's not that bad.
I'm ultimately agreeing with Matt. I'm just saying, like, lines like that can work if you bring the visual component with it, which I think Aliens did.
Yes, they did. Yes, right. Absolutely.
So I think it's a good attempt here. I like the ideas. I do think that they will learn from this episode, because once we get to season 7 and the Siege of AR-558, that is exactly what the direness that this should be. And I think that's a fantastic episode.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Characters learn things in this series?
Characters learn things, writers learn things.
No, I agree with that fully. And it's extra bad because it's just rehashing things that we already kind of know about the Klingons, and it's doing it unnecessarily. Not to mention, would Worf really react that way to some heat and being banged around? Is that how Klingons react, to just scream about, we're all dying anyway, instead of just like shutting up and looking for the next battle?
Yeah, you would think he's in his element now, right?
Yeah.
Not like he would not be getting stressed right now.
He's not uncomfortable. He's ready to roll.
Yeah,
ready to lay some smack on some Jem'Hadar asses.
But he also does kind of act like this too in the one of the most quoted scenes from First Contact.
You broke your little ships.
Well, no, it's like, if you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand.
But isn't that right around the scene where he smashes his little ships?
Well, Picard does, but
yes, that's why. Yeah, man, we're in the same scene, I think.
Yeah.
So let me finish out Act 3. The female Vorta again wants to talk. This time, Sisko has his rifle on her at all times. And she owns up to the fact that, yeah, there is definitely something on that ship that she wants. And something that she really needs. So why don't they just come in and get it and everybody else can go free? You can even have the ship. But Sisko says, no dice, no deal. Negotiations are over. And now comes the very casual shelling. Commercial break. So this is, again, one of those points where, yes, so much of this outlined on paper is right. I like it. But the execution is not so good. This shelling is, I think, supposed to be very scary and unnerving. And it is definitely not that.
Yeah, it sounds like
screen.
it sounds like a thunderstorm outside, doesn't it?
I'll add
But-
a very distant thunderstorm.
Yeah, definitely. And
So
the way they,
yeah, that's the thing, right? Is like I like the idea of the tension forcing these people to get at each other's throats. That's good. I just wish like this is the nicest shelling that's ever been put to screen, right? Because I mean, if they know that they want something in the ship, then obviously staying in the ship is the safest place for them to be. They're not going to get hurt.
Well, yeah, and they suss that out very quickly.
I know, but then they keep like they keep acting like, you know, we're going to be hit or destroyed or they're going to come down on us any minute. And
No, I think they figure it out very quickly, and they're like, "Oh, this is just going to be the equivalent of the Branch Davidians having Judas Priest play to them on loudspeakers for ages." They know that this is just going to be, "Oh, okay, I guess we're not allowed to sleep now for a very long time," and that's what it is.
I just wish that like they had done. I wish that. I guess the point is you want to be able to hear the actors' dialogue, but this should be louder.
Right. And that's where it should have been, is that you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have it be louder and get your cast. And what that you do is you have it be quiet and then a boom, and you see the actors all jump, and it's weird interspersed throughout random scenes. And it doesn't have to be this low rumble in the background. You would actually probably be able to fall asleep to that. You'd want it to be every once in a while, like shake the set, rock the cameras, do classic Star Trek stuff.
And, and the thing is, like, don't make it consistent. Like they keep firing at a consistent rate. Like make it like they don't know when it's coming, and then when they think they're like mid sentence and they get hit again. You know?
Yeah,
what I mean?
and just have an air horn on the set to make the actors jump, and then put in the boom over it in post. That's just like, oh, come on! You surprise me when you tell me how hot it is and all that, and then you don't get this sound right. Yeah, just frustrating.
See, but it's frustrating, but I'm not hating the episode. I like
no, right.
Like I think that we're saying it could be done better, but like I like, even though I feel like they're sometimes a bit forced, I do like the character dynamics that are going on in here. It's acted well, but most of them are acted well. So.
yeah, I think it's acted well. I think that writing wise, it's okay. I think directing, there could have been a better. I don't remember who he said the director was, but I think there were some choices that could have been made that would be better. And then, of course, I would excise this whole bit with Worf. It's just unnecessary. I don't even know that he needs to be here, but I guess if he has to be, I would assume he'd be back with the Defiant, though, waiting for them to call if they got in trouble. So I just altogether prefer he wasn't in this episode, and we focus more on Munez and O'Brien and maybe some of the issues that O'Brien has with people dying around him consistently.
Right. I mean, ultimately, I don't think Worf needs to be here at all. I mean, his involvement, I can't say is redeemed, but it's certainly helped by his last scene in there.
I do like that last scene.
Right. I mean, yeah that's
okay.
good. But ultimately, I think I would trade that out to get more O'Brien, hard time kind of a reference and carryover. I mean, that I think would ultimately be better than shouty Klingon.
And also, too, I
scenes.
mean, not for nothing, I think that I would have liked sort of this forced Worf storyline. Like, can't we trade him? I don't know why he would be along here, but we should just trade him for Bashir. I would rather see Bashir in this situation with O'Brien.
Yeah, it's weird. Bashir just shows up in this episode to have I could tell you why he isn't here, because the plot says he can't be because he might be able to help Munez. That's your reason why he's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like if he, if like say they're shooting at them and one of them shoots the med kit, doesn't hit him but shoots the med kit, you could just have.
I will disagree in that I think it's much more interesting, and this is one of the like a hidden "Let's Make Miles Suffer" episode. It is, because we're seeing him lose a friend.
So have him have like no emotional support there.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. It's awful, but I think it would be ultimately better to have him not have that. That said,
I think you should keep Cisco and Dax though.
Yeah. And that's where I want them to be aware of, oh, wait, this guy almost blew his brains out because he lost a friend. this could be a bad path that he's heading down. Let's try to address this. Or,
Man, I can visualize the scene too right now where Jadzia and Cisco are discussing things kind of in a closed door meeting, and Cisco goes, "Also, Dax, don't forget Miles nearly blew his brains out." I mean, he would say it obviously better than that.
No,
So make sure you don't get too far from him. Like, you need to be right by his side through this.
right.
And so that shows why she can't be around Cisco while he's going through a lot of the things that he's doing there. And then when they come back together at the end, it keeps the power of that scene that they have at the end. But yeah, I can envision
I would have that scene, except I would have Dax be telling Cisco, and that's what Cisco.
That's fair.
And that's how
he's got his mind on this, and she's
right. So I could hear Dax saying, we've got to keep this guy, we've got to keep O'Brien busy.
Yeah, and it's just
they can focus on his work.
Yeah, and it's like I would love to see that side of her character more than what we do get of her having the dark, sarcastic jokes. I mean, we like that from her character anyhow, but I think it would be ultimately for the better to see what Chris is laying out, or laying out.
What we're basically asking her to be is the way she was in The Quickening. Remember how she was in The Quickening, where she was like the sage advice person?
Yeah. God damn, man. I wish that was in here.
Well, she ends up being the sage advice person at the end of this.
Agreed.
Yes. Well. But
yeah, I like that.
So that carries through, and it would have been a through line for this episode if she had also been doing that for Miles as well. So, but those are 20 years later revision eyes.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
And again, I want to emphasize, at least from my point of view, this episode's not terrible. I actually have a
I fully agree. I actually really love this episode, and it doesn't sound like it from my conversation because I'm half asleep and grumpy, but I really do like this episode a lot. There are just a couple things I would change.
I mean, that's ultimately where I want to try and have these conversations go as much as possible, is that we all love Star Trek. We all love Deep Space Nine, and we want every episode to be as good as humanly possible. So that extends even to the good episodes. We want every episode in the end to be 5 stars, right? And these are the things that would have elevated a good episode to a great episode.
You're right. I'm just saying that, sometimes we, when we have a truly, in some of our opinions, bad episode, we really pile on here. And, we're not piling on, but we're pointing out things that didn't quite work. But at least for me, I had positive memories of this episode going into it, and I had positive memories coming out of it. So I still do like it.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like is the Worf stuff. I'm with everything else that happens. The shelling thing doesn't bother me because I feel like it achieves the purpose that it's supposed to. I didn't say this earlier when you guys were having your big conversation about it, but I think that the shelling is supposed to quickly be written off. I think that they're not supposed to feel the danger. I think you could do it better. You could have, the ship rock a little bit, but it can't be too much because you're also trying to drive home the point that Jim Hadar.
I would agree with that, except that it's the shelling that spurns another argument.
Right. So, and they call that out specifically as one of the reasons why they're losing their minds at it. So, I mean, we're just talking about this because I think all these things they're so tantalizingly close to the perfect kind of thing with just like little tweaks, like put a little bit of makeup on their head to make them look scuffed up. It's like little things like that.
I'll just foreshadow my rating. I mean, it's not that this episode could have been an A. It had the potential to be an A, but for me, even with its flaws, it's still a solid B.
Yeah, we're going to be in the same neighborhood there for sure. So in Act 4, like we said, they're just setting off these explosives around the ship. It's pure psychological warfare. And they aren't trying to hurt the ship at all. So our crew is now ready to try and fire up the ship, engines, weapons, and they don't really expect it to be all that effective or helpful, if they're all being honest with themselves. And things are looking worse for Muniz. He is starting to get delusional. He's thinking the shelling is now fireworks, and he thinks he's actually seeing them. And Dax is failing at the search on the ship for whatever is on there. She only finds scrambled data crystals. Worf rips out a computer terminal from the Vorta's quarters. Maybe that will be good. And it seems like the shelling is working as the crew is getting increasingly heated, especially around the Muniz situation. And things are not so good in our next clip.
There's no way for anyone to die.
I told you he is not going to die.
It is only a matter of time.
So we should just kill him, right?
If you truly are his friend, you would consider that option. It would be a more honorable death than the one he's enduring.
I'm not some bloodthirsty Klingon looking for an excuse to murder my friend.
That's enough. No. You're just another weak human afraid to face death. I said, that's enough! Your Starfleet officers now start acting like it!
Tough guys, a little pressure and they buckle.
Dax, maybe you haven't noticed, but no one's laughing. Now I know it's hot, we're filthy, tired, and we've got 10 isotons of explosives going off outside. But we will never get out of this if we don't pull it together and start to act like professionals. Chief, I want that power grid up and running. I said, Commander Ward, see if you can get that turret to rotate. Aye, sir. Dax, search the ship again and again until you find what the porter wants.
Yes, sir.
And you, Mr. Muniz, your orders are to stay alive.
So I have two thoughts coming out of that. One, I really like how Miles says murder. That's very good. Number two, controversial comment coming up.
What?
I don't think Worf was wrong.
He's not wrong, but here's the thing. I think as I was listening to the clip, I figured out a way to make Worf's beliefs in this episode work better than they are here, because here they just kind of like come out of nowhere. But you have Muniz this whole episode putting on a really brave face, but you could tell by the way he talks to Miles and to, you know, the rest of the crew that he knows he's going to die, right? So, and it looks like he's like, I can imagine if the Jem'Hadar make the weapons so ugly that it's got to be an intensely slow, painful death. So wouldn't it have been great if at one point Muniz just says to Miles, I'm not going to make it. You need to focus on the ship. Kill me. Or something like that. And then Worf could come in and say, well, you know, if you're truly his friend, you would honor his request.
Yeah, I think that would be a perfectly viable alternate angle to go down in this episode. I mean, we'd be getting pretty chock full of interesting stuff, but I think that would have been a more effective option than what we were given. Because
then Worf has a reason to bring up the fact that, you know, if a warrior requests to be honorably killed in battle instead of suffering a slow, painful death, that's something that a friend would do, according to his perspective.
And it would be an interesting way that they could parallel and call back to the episode with Kern, where he was faced with similar-ish type decisions that, you know, I mean, it's the precedence there for that kind of a discussion to have in the show. They're prepared to discuss it.
Right.
And it's not going to have a cheap out of let's erase his memory.
And if you do that as well, then you could also bring in Miles's trauma from hard times. Like, I killed my friend there. I'm not going to kill another one here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, it would have been good. I could see where they maybe wouldn't want to go to that well twice in relative quick order. I know it's after a hiatus, but
no, but then at least
the quickening episode is fairly quick, you know, recent on the heels of this episode.
But at least it would have made some of the motivations, especially on Worf's part, make more sense.
Oh yeah, definitely. Very shouty
like,
clip,
you know,
though.
it's still like I like the some of the execution on this, and whenever you get Cisco in his cut the crap and straighten out and fly right, you know, mood, I do like that. I mean, the speech itself was good.
Yeah, it's always the shouty, you know, Cisco giving people a dressing down scene I always really like. And
Daddy
this one
Cisco.
works.
Great.
Yeah. So 10 hours after that clip, they think they are ready to try and give the ship a shake loose and try and take off. Well, they give it the old college try and completely fail. The ship is now worse than it was before. Everything is blown out. The ship is dead. And they turn to notice that Munez is too. He passed away in the past few minutes during the attempt to launch. Dex and Cisco have a moment, and Cisco realizes that a lot of people are dying here, and it's all worth it. He isn't wrong, and they have to see this through to the end. And as we go to commercial break, we find what was so special on this ship. A container starts to shapeshift. It was a changeling on the ship this whole time. Commercial break. So, talking offline with Blair last week, he and I both had agreed that this twist, just like last week's, was actually pretty good. I mean, I can't remember if I would have known it at the time, but it works quite well. And then in retrospect, when you go through and think about all the reasons of why the Jem'Hadar did what they did, it makes sense. It's not perfect, but I think it's actually a pretty effective twist here late in the episode.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I thought I was going to be debating you on this end. I like this twist, and I think it makes, you know, one of the obvious questions is, you know, at the end of this, why wouldn't they just admit that that's what they were looking for in the ship, right? Things would have been avoided. But
we'll talk about that.
You know, what I would say to that is that look at all the evidence they have of when Starfleet, and even more in particular, when this crew has run into changelings in the past. You had one that was killed on the Defiant, and they just killed one last week. They're not going to trust this crew with that information.
Right. That's all fair. I don't have any real issues with that. The only thing I thought most of what they covered was very clever. Like they just couldn't go in and start shooting because they might be under the assumption that the changeling is alive in there, can't get out, but he is masquerading as one of them. So I can't just go in and blast willy-nilly. I'll just plug a shapeshifter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't explain why they just can't transport everyone out one at a time and then ask, are you a god? You know, to steal a line from Ghostbusters, transport them out one at a time. And if they don't immediately own up, you just kill them. And then you work through. And then once all the humans are out of there or the solids, you just go through and go, hey, come on out. We're okay. So that is where there's a little bit of a plot hole where if any listener can figure out why they just didn't do that, by all means, let me know. But again, that's not a ruinous nitpick necessarily. It's no, just
I very much like the. You're right. There is that plot hole that I didn't even think of. That's rather unfortunate. But I do like the conversation that spurns between Cisco and Kalana right now, and like if we had just trusted each other.
Well, I will get into that because I did not like that. That might be where we argue, though. But the one other little thing that before I'll go into Act 5, it's just that sensor that they found and that they kept. I know they said it burned a lot of itself out. They don't know what it was. That would be an interesting thing for Starfleet intelligence to have because presumably that sensor is looking for shape-shifted shapeshifters. Right? As it turns out that thing was like actually trying to figure out what is actually the shapeshifter in there. It didn't end up working apparently, but I guess that was what the function of it was. So that's kind of interesting. So Matt, to your point, let me go through to Act 5, at least capture that scene, and then we can start talking about that. So in Act 5, we come back and the changeling is pretty much immediately dies in a bit of CGI fury. Turns out having that bounce around on the ship at basically the speed of light wasn't too good for it either. It now makes sense to them why the Jem'Hadar were pulling their punches this whole time. And they realize now that, boy, are they in trouble if the Jem'Hadar can just storm in now and do whatever they wanted. But not really, because as it turns out, the Jem'Hadar had all killed themselves for failing to protect their god. The Vorta appears, revealing this. And this is where I'll hint at my dissatisfaction with the scene. They share some overly Federation-styled regrets that they just can't all trust each other. And that's why they found themselves in this situation. And Matt, to my point, this all felt a little bit of, sit down, Sonny, did you learn your lesson here?
You're right to a certain extent. I just like the way that it's, maybe I just like the way that it's played. Because
It's acted well.
I love it as a piece of subversion because I don't buy a thing she's saying, and I don't think you're meant to buy it. I think that this is absolutely a subversion, and that they're setting them up because this never follows through. They never come back and go back to this. She's toying with him still, even after all of it. That's what I feel like.
It's very possible, but I would argue that when their walls break down is that they just had their god die in front of them for all intents and purposes. That I think she is expressing true regret because she failed at the only thing that's important to them.
Yeah, but I still find it hard because there's layers to this whole thing, right? So yes, she feels that regret, but she's not gonna, and she might use that to continue to manipulate him in this situation, but it's still a manipulation and therefore a subversion and a way to string him along and figure something else out about him, see where he stands, use his own ideals to set him up for the future.
I mean, I suppose, but I just feel like the scene plays as we're dropping all pretenses at this point. This is what we could have wanted, and this is what could have been avoided had we just actually talked to each other like, for lack of a better term, human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be perfectly happy to accept the way Chris is detailing it, but yeah, definitely the way I read it was more so like how Matt and I are saying.
I mean, maybe she is the ultimate subversionist, but I mean, the way that the actress plays it too, this whole episode, she has kind of like this sing-song quality to her voice like most of the Vorta do. And then at this last episode, it's like she's talking and she puts on this tone that tells you that she's talking for real. Now maybe she's putting that on that tone. Right. But she acts different when she knows that it's all for lost.
And to my theory at the beginning is that she might be a little in over her head at points. Just from inexperience, this isn't necessarily her role. They had to just force her hand in there. I would think that person, if we are to accept my hypothesis there, that she would not be able to see the long game in this situation when she is probably devastated. Because we kind of
read that at the beginning, though. I think that she was playing him on that whole thing too. And I guess the only reason that I think that this is also a subversion is because everything we know about the Vorta at this point is that nearly everything they say is a complete lie or fabrication. Yeah. So I can't imagine that this is full on honesty. I think that it could absolutely be a play on some honesty that is in her soul that she's using to again subvert, but everything the Vorta do is towards that goal, to manipulate, to challenge, to string along or figure out something else about these people. So I don't know. I just read it as I've read the Vorta since we've gotten to know them in the last season.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it works perfectly well. I mean, it's an effective end either way she might be playing it. It's more or less satisfying. The only real issue I had was just the final lesson learned kind of thing, where I think it's kind of encapsulates the overall review of this episode. Is like the outline is really, really good. The outline for the episode is really good. It's the end execution sometimes will be misplaced, and this is just like both of them felt it felt just a little too lessony learned kind of thing.
You're right, but I think it's the way it's acted and the fact that we rarely see the Vorta not being smug and where they actually have messed up. You know what I mean? So the fact that her tone changes and her demeanor changes, that's not something we really ever see from Vorta. Maybe the only other time I can think of one is when the Wayun clone, who's defective, quote unquote, wants to defect to the Federation, has that kind of inner pain that's expressed. Right. And that's something that you don't see from Vorta that often.
So to kind of maybe argue, not that I really want to argue against Chris's point, but here goes, is that I gotta think, and Chris is just smiling at that, but she has got to now go back to the founders with a little goofy little snifter full of remains. She is not going to be welcomed back and just like nicely debriefed and like, you know, oh, next time, scamp, you know, get out there and do well.
Especially
her line's going to get shut down.
Well, especially if I don't know if her line's going to get shut down, but she's going to give the thing, and then they're probably going to make her activate that termination implant that they all supposedly have, right?
Right. So that's where I'm like, I can't imagine, because she knows she's dead. I got to imagine she knows she's dead here because she completely failed at saving a god. And we know that the founders don't look too kindly on that. Yeah.
Especially if these are clones and we could just replace her with another one.
Right. And we know they have, the Vorta at least have a bit of self-preservation to them. We see that quite extensively later on. So I kind of all that, like, you know, cheating, bringing some downstream knowledge into it too. I'm a little bit more inclined to think it's genuine, but you know, maybe she's a great Vorta and that programming overrides, in her case, the self-preservation and regret that she's probably going to be dead very quickly.
We're going deep into like potential situations here, but
no, that's fine. I mean,
if all that's the case, then is she even going back? And why would a Vorta go back with that information? Is it because I don't see that their obedience is?
No, but
obviously they have some issues with obviously they have some issues with obedience. If we're looking back a few episodes of that Jim Hadar episode, and if the Jim Hadar who are not that smart can get in there like that, then potentially the Vorta.
Right. You're right. You know, screw that whole Tosk lives thing. This chick still
she's out there and she's got information and the ashes of a founder. Who knows
she's
what that means or what that's worth.
I like Chris's theory there that she's just lambing it now. So let's bring it home. So she Amsgrays heads for the sunset and she's off living her life somewhere. The Defiant arrives and they tug the ship free and head home with their booty. Again, Dax and Sisko agree that this was all worth it in our final clip, and we get a second bonus clip in there where Miles sits Shiva with Worf.
What did Starfleet have to say about our prize?
They're pleased.
That's all, just pleased.
Very pleased. They're giving us all medals.
I'll add it to my collection.
Starfleet Command is waiting for my official report. But every time I try to get started, I find myself staring at the casualty list and reading the same 5 names over and over again. Talor, Rooney, Bertram, Hoya, Muñez.
It may sound cruel, but we both know that ship out there was worth it. Those 5 deaths may save 5,000 lives, or maybe even 5 million.
And if I had to make the same trade all over again, I would. But 5 people are dead. Fine men and women who deserved a lot more than to die on some lonely planet 50,000 light years away from home. When you were at the academy, was Professor Samak teaching?
Moral and ethical issues of command.
Great speech. Always maintain emotional distance between yourself and those under your command.
Nice.
I try to follow it. But it's a lot more complicated outside of the classroom. Did you know that Jake and Nunez have the same birthday? That I performed the ceremony at Hoya's wedding. And Rooney, he could play the trumpet. I heard him at Quark's once, and he had the people dancing in the aisles.
I remember. And you know something else I remember about him? How proud he was to wear his uniform. And how proud he was to serve under you. The same as Hoya, Talor, Bertram, and Nunez. They chose a life in Starfleet. They knew the risks. And fighting for something that they believed in.
That doesn't make it any easier.
Maybe nothing should.
We used to phase conjugate graviton emitter in the tractor beam. And baby came out of the rub first time. You would have loved it, KK.
I did not mean to interrupt.
It's all right.
Your
It's
performance.
funny, Worf just has to scream every scene he comes in.
Yes. It's an old Klingon tradition. When a warrior dies in battle, his comrades stay with the body to keep away predators. That allows the spirit to leave the body when it is time.
I actually would have liked Worf to say that he was sitting Shiva, especially since his adoptive Earth parents are clearly Jewish.
Oh, that's true too, yeah. I was just goofing around with that. Yeah, you're right.
Keep the predators away.
I'm sure KK would like that.
So there you go. That ends the ship. Oh,
Interesting little episode that I think we had a lot of good discussion about, but I'm curious as to where we all lie on it. So we're going to go into final thoughts and ratings. We'll start with you, Chris. What are your final thoughts and ratings for the ship?
Despite my grumpiness throughout this episode, I actually really love this, and I think that it becomes great in the follow-through. It's a middling, back and forth little episode that tries to be a thriller and a siege drama, but there are certain nuances that it takes on that I do like. The ending is a little hitch over the head. You see Timmy, but it still gives me chills when I watch it every single time. And so I like it when she says, maybe you shouldn't ever feel okay about it. Maybe this is one of those things that you just have to sit with and time has to heal. It's a strong ending to what is a pretty all over the place episode. So if it wasn't for the Babylon 5 ending where we go in and we see how it's affecting our characters, this episode would definitely probably just be a 3 for me, but that extra little bit bumps it to a solid 4 out of 5, cutting colloquial conversations coming in the close to keep qualifications quintessential.
Thank you, Chris. Matt, why don't you go next?
yeah, Chris, great point on the Babylon 5 ending. This absolutely did have that. So the criticisms of this episode are, I've thrown them out there. This was so tantalizingly close to being a truly great episode, and it doesn't quite get there. It gets just very good status, which I'm happy with. I enjoy this quite a lot. But that last scene is the course correction back to where they probably should have been this whole time. Nice character, personal, emotional stuff that I would like to have seen a little bit more of that kind of tone, the quiet tone rather than the shouty tone. And we got the bickering stuff. I don't really want that so much as I want the, hey, go check on Miles. Is he okay? Stuff. Where I think we put some very interesting ideas that would have bumped this all the way up to that all-time classic 5-star, but we didn't quite get that. Instead, we got just a very entertaining, very strong 4-star episode. Good times. Very close to being a classic, but just misses it.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo a lot of what you guys said. I think that this episode has great ideas and pretty good execution. Sometimes when we say that, when we preface something with this episode had great ideas, we usually say that it had crappy execution, but that's not the case here. I just feel like if they had tightened a little bit of the tone and maybe had better motivations for some of the character interactions, this could have been, you're right, this could have been a classic, but it's still very good. And I think a lot of it does get by on the fact that even if it's not written as tightly as it could be, the actors act the hell out of it. And I like the guest star this week. I like all the guest stars this week because Muñez, I thought, did a great job. Obviously, I thought the woman who played Kalana did a great job. And I like the dour but bittersweet ending. And you're right, that probably should have been most of the tone. But I also feel like you need, in a siege situation, you do need for tempers to flare. And like I said, I do feel like they get that balance correct when they do the Siege of AR 558 in season 7. We'll have to compare that episode to this one when we get there. But my memory is that they get the tone pretty much perfect in that episode. But this one, like I said, if it's not an A, it's at least a solid B. So I will echo everybody and also give it a 4. And that was a really interesting conversation, more than I thought we'd have, because this episode kind of moves. It doesn't really drag. It moves very quickly.
Right? A lot of good concepts, and I think probably a lot of fodder for UP nominations. Guest, death, fun to review. I mean, this could hit a lot of categories.
Well, we got lots of season yet before we get to that, but we certainly hope you're enjoying coming along for the ride with us. And if you are, please let us know in feedback. There are a number of ways to get a hold of us. You can email us at up2podcast@gmail.com. You can leave a comment in our forums at forum.trekmatefamily.com. Follow us on Twitter at UP2podcast and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/upperpylon2. Also, please let others know about how we're doing by giving us an iTunes rating. They really do help out the show, and they get the word out there. We're getting into one of the best seasons of the series, and we've got some great episodes coming down the pipeline, and we would love for all of you to join us for that. So thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. Also, you can find us individually on Twitter. I am at mhanson0207, talking about all things Star Trek, all things sci-fi, all things Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, if you want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I've seen it twice now. We can have a chat about it. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, that's all there for you at mhanson0207.
I can be found at Pro Sub-Zero, geeking out over the news of a potential new Judge Dredd TV series. Give me Carl Urban or give me death.
And the countdown is here, folks. T-minus 2 weeks until Golden Girls blast your Twitter.
S-faced Golden Girls.
That'll be awesome because I just did a free month subscription to Hulu, so I've got all the episodes lined up for me. But that'll be lots of fun. I look forward to that. That'll be at Carnivore J, of course. And we'll continue our journey through season 5 next week when we lighten up the mood a little with looking for Parmak in all the wrong places.
So until next time, my first wish is to see this plague of mankind, war, banished from the earth. This is Chris in South Carolina.
I'm Matt in Buffalo, and when in doubt, say nothing and move on.
And this is Matt from Arizona. Closing hailing frequencies, docking clamps are open, and you are cleared for departure.